The jungle ridge was a knife edge of coral and darkness on the night of September 12, 1942, when Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson stood listening to the sounds drifting up from the black void below. The humidity hung thick in the air, carrying the unmistakable noise of an army moving with complete confidence. Branches cracked under boots. Metal clinked as rifles and bayonets shifted against packs. Japanese soldiers called to one another without even attempting to mask their presence. There were 3,000 of them gathering beneath the trees, preparing to sweep upward and carve through the last line of high ground before Henderson Field. Edson, with barely 840 Marines under his command, could only listen and wait, knowing he was outnumbered more than 3 to 1. This narrow ridge of coral and kunai grass was the final shield protecting the airfield that kept the entire Guadalcanal operation alive. If the Japanese broke through, the airstrip would fall under artillery fire, the supply planes would be destroyed, and the 12,000 Marines on the island would be trapped with no possibility of reinforcement or retreat. Everything depended on holding this line for one more night. The men gathered behind him were exhausted beyond measure. Many had not slept in more than a day and a half. They fought malaria as fiercely as they fought the enemy, shivering with fever while clutching rifles that felt heavier with every hour. Their uniforms were rotting from the relentless tropical moisture, their bodies thin from weeks of half-rations, their eyes sunken from hunger and fatigue. Edson did not bother to stir them with promises of glory or patriotic fervor. He gave them the one truth he had: endure until morning. One more night, and relief would come. It was all they could cling to as the shadows below began to shift into coordinated movement and the first waves of Japanese infantry prepared to surge upward. To understand why this moment mattered, it is necessary to remember the world as it stood in the summer of 1942. Japan was not simply winning the war across the Pacific, it was dominating it with a speed and ferocity that left global military observers stunned. In a matter of months, Hong Kong, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, Burma, Wake Island, and the Philippines had all collapsed. British and American troops had surrendered in numbers that were nearly unimaginable. Each victory fed a growing belief within the Japanese military that Western soldiers lacked the spiritual strength necessary for prolonged combat. The cult of Bushido had convinced Japanese commanders that their willpower, their discipline, and their historical warrior ethos made them intrinsically superior to any opponent they faced. They misread surrender as cowardice, misinterpreted logistical collapse as weakness, and allowed themselves to believe that a single Japanese soldier was worth 10 Americans. War, they concluded, was a matter of spirit, and their spirit was unbreakable. That belief fed the strategic disaster that lay ahead for them on Guadalcanal. While American intelligence was cautious and grimly realistic, Japanese intelligence was built upon assumptions bordering on fantasy. Reports claimed the Marines on Guadalcanal were nothing more than desperate convicts and undisciplined men masquerading as soldiers. They were believed to be only 2,000 strong, malnourished, demoralized, and ripe for destruction. Tokyo planned its counterattack with this delusion as its foundation. The real number was 6 times higher, and the men waiting behind their rifles had undergone some of the most demanding training in the world. Marine Corps doctrine had been shaped by decades of refining the most difficult operation in warfare: amphibious assault. They had studied landing operations, stormed beaches during 7 major pre-war exercises, perfected naval gunfire coordination, and trained every recruit as a rifleman before teaching them anything else. The result was an infantry force uniquely suited for small unit tactics, rapid response under pressure, and fire discipline lethal enough to break massed infantry attacks. The Japanese would learn this the hard way at the Battle of the Tenaru in late August, when elite Japanese troops attempted a night charge across a sandbar, expecting to annihilate the Marines in a single swift attack. Instead, they were met with machine gun crossfire, pre-registered rifle positions, and tanks that sealed their destruction with daylight precision. Over 800 Japanese soldiers died, while Marine losses remained small. Tokyo dismissed it as an anomaly, a failure of leadership rather than a failure in doctrine. They convinced themselves that a stronger force would succeed. That force came in the form of Major General Kawaguchi and 3,000 fresh soldiers hacking their way through dense jungle for weeks to hit the Marines from an unexpected direction. Their target was Edson's Ridge, the final barrier protecting Henderson Field. The Japanese arrived exhausted, hungry, and diseased, but still confident their spirit and sheer numbers would crush the Marines who had been fighting non-stop for over a month. The bombardment began at 9:30 p.m., with shells erupting across the ridge, throwing coral shards through the air like shrapnel. And then the jungle erupted as wave after wave of Japanese infantry surged forward, screaming battle cries intended to break morale as much as to conceal their advance. The night dissolved into chaos. Machine gun barrels glowed red under non-stop fire. Marines fought until ammunition dwindled, then turned to bayonets, knives, even entrenching tools. The Japanese pressed so close that men could smell sweat and gunpowder on the enemy as they grappled in near-total darkness. The center of Edson's line faltered, pockets of Marines were pushed back, officers were killed, confusion spread in the pitch black of the ridge. Yet Edson refused to let the line collapse. He stood in full view of the enemy, silhouetted by artillery flashes, rallying his men, repositioning units, and forcing exhausted Marines to hold ground they believed was already lost. His leadership under fire would become legend. By 3 a.m., the battle reached its breaking point. Edson was out of reserves, the Japanese were surging toward the airfield, and even General Vandegrift admitted later that it was the only moment in the entire Guadalcanal campaign when he believed defeat was imminent. Then, through the darkness, American artillery opened fire with devastating precision. Shells crashed into the attacking formations, tearing apart tightly packed columns and shattering what remained of Kawaguchi's momentum. By dawn, more than 600 Japanese soldiers lay dead across the ridge. The Marines had suffered fewer than 60 killed. The survivors staggered away into the jungle, their confidence shattered and their assumptions ruined. This night marked the end of any illusion of Japanese invincibility. The myth died on Edson's Ridge just as it had at the Tenaru, exposing a truth that Tokyo had refused to acknowledge. American Marines did not break. And now, if you're watching this and want more powerful stories of history, sacrifice, and the battles that shaped the world, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. What moment from the Pacific War should be explored next? Your engagement helps us bring more of these dramatic narratives to life.